So happy to be joined on the podcast this week by Brent Musberger, the man, the myth, the legend. You were looking live at Brent Musberger right now in his kitchen. And so we're very, very happy to have him on the day after the first game in the history of the Las Vegas Raiders. Brent, you were Mike's side for that affair at Allegiant Stadium on Monday night. Just give me an overarching view of what the scene was like Monday night for the first game in Vegas.
Surreal, I guess, would be the word I would use. Peter, we had called a game, Lincoln Kennedy and I had called a game on radio the week before, but it was a road game. So we were looking at the game on the monitor provided by CBS. They were broadcasting the game back in Charlotte. But last night, of course, we had the game in front of us. We had the players down on the field in this beautiful new $2 billion arena that was built, of course, to house primarily the Raiders, now the Las Vegas Raiders. I found it difficult, to tell you the truth. I really missed the fans looking down on the field. During the game, the ESPN audio was picking up the sideline chatter of the Raiders. You could hear John Gruden helping the officials out on every pass down the field. Interestingly enough, either they were on a delay, but there wasn't profanity on the sidelines. But it was a very active sideline during the game. The stadium is beautiful, and it has a tremendous view of the strip behind it. And of course, the Al Davis Memorial torches there, lit by his lovely wife, Carol, prior to the game. Mark Davis, the son, is not coming to games because the fans are not allowed. So he said it didn't seem right to him or appropriate to come to the game. So he stayed away and had a party nearby with some friends over there watching the game. The facility, fans around the country, Peter, are going to come. They're going to come in droves to see their team play in Allegiant Stadium. There was no doubt about that to me. And never, ever in my imagination did I think the National Football League would someday come to Las Vegas. It really stamps the city as a big-time city, being one of the 32 franchises in the NFL. The National Hockey League has done very well with the Vegas Golden Knights. But Peter, you and I know that the NFL attracts a much more diverse, larger audience. And it was great. There were parties all over Las Vegas. My son, Scott, who's my spotter, and I went down early to the stadium. There were tailgaters who were parked outside around the stadium, taking pictures with a Legion in the background. It was very, very cool from that regard. But I really missed the fans on the inside. It seemed more like a scrimmage to me.
Right.
And I had some difficulty getting myself involved. We had a lot of media people upstairs at the 400 level where the press boxes are. I was a bit surprised. We had a large crowd. I guess reporters from all over the country wanted to come in. But it is a great facility.
So, Brent, Ian Eagle told me the same thing last week after his first game. He said it's very, very hard to kind of keep your spirits up or whatever, because oftentimes you're responding to the noise of the crowd, and there's no noise to respond to now. So You've been doing games forever. How different was that doing it last night?
Well, it's something I'd never experienced before. And so, Lincoln Kennedy we added Coach Tom Flores, who, by the way, Peter, you've been a Hall of Fame voter for a long time. What in the world are you people thinking of? Okay. Flores should have been in the Hall of Fame years ago. Listen, he's the only person that I know of who has won 4 Super Bowl rings as a player, an assistant coach, and as a head coach, he won 2 Super Bowl rings. He's the first minority coach, he's Hispanic, in the history of the National Football League. He's done everything in this league. It is mind-boggling to me. I just want to throw that in because Tom was in the booth with me last night, and it was great having him because I'm getting back to your point. I used conversation with the two of them to sort of help me through the game because I missed that energy that Ian Eagle told you about because he's exactly right. We did not have the energy. We had entertainment on the sideline with the chatter from the Raiders, obviously, and ESPN was pumping in sound into their feed, but that didn't help us because we weren't picking that up. So we had to make do with what we had, and the game, of course, got very interesting from a Raiders standpoint. As you know, after a miserable first quarter, they really dominated. And any team in the NFL that can score on the last possession of the first half, field goal, then take that kickoff to start the second half, as the Raiders did, and march down the field for a touchdown, that puts you in a commanding position. They kept the Saints off the field in that third quarter. They dominated. That was the difference in the ball game.
I thought it was really interesting, watching the game, that in the first, say, 20 minutes of the game, I thought the Saints were going to blow them out.
So did I.
And the Raiders really hung in there.
Absolutely.
And they made Drew Brees pay, and the Michael Thomas absence was a huge factor in this game because that's the guy who Brees can throw up a ball 20 yards downfield, and Thomas is going to win. As Sean Payton told me last year once, he goes, Michael Thomas wins the 50-50 balls 75% of the time. And they just didn't have that. And I think that sort of exaggerated maybe the problems that Brees is having throwing the ball downfield right now. But you just got to hand it to the Raiders. They were so tough last night. The touchdown pass to the fullback was ingenious, using the tight end, an athletic, tough, Gronk-like tight end like Waller. And obviously Josh Jacobs is a top 10 running back, might be top 5. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, Brent. I don't know how far they'll go, but that was really an impressive game for them last night.
Peter, when you look at the schedule, they probably had the toughest stretch of games to open the season, okay?
Right.
They're 0-5 until this year in that opening game back on the East Coast, that 10 o'clock start. And of course, they dominated Carolina, got the win. But then after the Panthers, and that's a game in which the Raiders were favored, then, of course, it was the Saints last night, followed up on a short week. You've got to go play the New England Patriots in Foxborough. You come back home the next week, play the Buffalo Bills. Then, oh, by the way, you get on an airplane the next week, you go play Kansas City, okay? I have told one and all of my friends that if the Raiders can win 2 of those first 5 games, okay, they will be in contention for a playoff spot come December. Mark it down. Well, we've already got them, and now I'm getting greedy. Can we win one of the next 3? Can we finish this stretch 3-2 before the bye week? Then I would make them one of the favorites to get the wild card. Listen, the difference in the quarterbacks last night was stark. Okay.
Yeah.
Derek Carr and John Gruden are very definitely now on the same page. Okay. John, a little bit different as a play caller. This is the 3rd year that Derek has been in that system. He did a wonderful job of managing. John was more aggressive last night than he has been. Went for it on a couple of 4th downs. On a 3rd and 5, he went to Ruggs and got the pass interference call. I will tell you from my perspective, Drew Brees is like Tom Brady. You're going to have some good weeks from time to time, but you're not going to beat Father Time simply because no one ever has. I'm twice as old as Drew, and I know in many regards I haven't beaten Father Time. Now, I'm not saying that he's finished. He's going to have great days just like Tom Brady did, or a better day last Sunday that he did on the opening week. But there's deterioration. I covered Drew Brees at Purdue. I've followed his career closely. Even with Michael Thomas, if you go back and look at the last 3 games that Thomas has played, Drew Brees and Thomas were not lighting up. They were not lighting up arenas, okay? There's deterioration, and they're going to have to address it at New Orleans going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah. How are you going to handle the road this year? Are you going to Foxborough, or will you do the game from Vegas?
A 16 game schedule in Allegiant Stadium, my man.
Wow.
I get in
Wow.
my car with my spotter, Scott. I put some cold ones in the back of the Suburban for after the game. Drive down there. We're in the arena in about 20 minutes. I'm up high. The networks, CBS, Fox, of course, you guys at NBC, you provide us with great feeds up there on the monitors. My man, I'm living the dream. I got a $2 billion stadium all to myself to watch these Raiders.
So let's talk about Vegas for a second.
Sure.
I'm fascinated. It's almost like last night snuck up on all of us. You know, okay, you knew the Raiders were coming to Vegas, but then around the country, everybody was talking about COVID. They're talking about social justice.
Right.
You know, there's all these other topics, and all of a sudden, last night, you look up, and there's Allegiant Stadium, and there's the Raiders finally playing in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
What did it feel to you after all the build-up time and obviously you live there?
Right. It felt really neat, Peter. It was great having the Raiders play their first game in Las Vegas. It was an exciting time to be here. And of course, the city embraced the Golden Knights completely when the National Hockey League moved here. They got upset by the Dallas Stars, knocked out of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But along come the Raiders, and suddenly they're 2-0. I'll tell you what was interesting with the Golden Knights and the Raiders, because you can bet legally on sports here in the state of Nevada. An awful lot of people they went to the counter at the various sports books around town, and whether it was a $20 or a $2,000 bet, didn't matter. They wanted that ticket. They took a picture of it on their cell phone so they could frame it from the first game. The spread during a week was basically 5.5. New Orleans was favored, meaning that they win by 6. Of course, the Saints would have cashed the bet. By the time they kicked off last night, it had slipped to 3.5. That means that whole lot of cash came pouring in on the Raiders. But a lot of it was by folks in town. They don't bet on football regularly, but they wanted to have a wager on their home team in that first game. And the books around town, they were jammed with people watching on the big screen televisions, people enjoying the action in here. It was just great having them here. But I tell you something else, because of the pandemic, okay, and because of the seriousness of it, and the fact that Nevada has been hit hard, one of the hard hit states out on the West Coast, Allegiant Stadium and the Raiders are going to help this city recover. Traffic is off. The hotel rooms have gone begging for customers. The casinos are 2/3 empty. But going forward, as they move toward a vaccine, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later, we shall see about that. Maybe it'll extend into next year. Nobody knows anything as far as I can tell. But the comeback for this city will be helped dramatically by the Raiders and Allegiant Stadium. Garth Brooks had an August concert postponed. They have rescheduled it for February. And I know many, many people are still holding on to their tickets. And it will be a great venue for big time entertainment shows to come to. So it's going to help the recovery of this city, because this city is being hit economically very, very hard. Gambling is, well, basic. That's the only source of revenue. This is not an energy city or anything like that. People come here with the conventions. They've all been canceled. So I think the Raiders and Allegiant Stadium are going to be a huge part of the recovery.
Isn't it incredible that the National Football League put a franchise in Vegas? I mean, sometimes I just think to myself, how in the world did this happen?
I agree with you. And I never thought it would happen. But what's fascinating about this is that Al Davis, he was very fascinated with this city, okay? He and Jimmy the Greek were best of friends, and that's how I came to know Al. That we would go out to dinner. In fact, before the Greek went on the air on the NFL Today on Saturday night, he would always talk to Al. That's where he'd pick up some of his nuggets and some of his gems on other teams, and it was great. It was great having conversations and sitting at the dinner table with Al Davis. But he would always ask about the spreads and the betting and et cetera and et cetera. So lo and behold, when he goes back to Oakland, it's not Al himself. He passes away, but it's his son, Mark Davis, who is able to pull this off and get a franchise into Las Vegas. Now, I have to tell you, politically, and I haven't asked Mr. Kroenke, whom I know and I respect, my guess is, Peter, politically, inside the framework of the ownership of the National Football League, that the Rams, because of the number of Raider fans who are in Southern California, that's where they won a couple of Super Bowls with Flores, because of that fan base, Mr. Kroenke was much more comfortable with the Chargers being his partner than the Raiders coming to Los Angeles. Let's say that the league had decided to make the Raiders a co-tenant in Los Angeles, and let's say they would move the Chargers into Las Vegas. I think history would be completely different. But Mark Davis has got to be ecstatic. He went from one of the owners with the lowest amount of annual revenue coming forward, and suddenly he's now up there with the elite because of the new stadium built by the bed tax largely, although the Raiders did have to borrow a lot of money from the Bank of America to complete the $2 billion statement here. They're going to run, they may run, 50 million over budget, something like that, but nothing compared to what's happened in Southern California.
Right.
That stadium's coming in around $5 billion right now, an enormous overrun of costs down there in the Los Angeles area. But politically, it's going to work to the Raiders' benefit. There is no question about it. There's no personal income tax in this state. That's going to help the Raiders lure free agents to come into Las Vegas and play for the Raiders. There's a lot of advantages. Now, one of the disadvantages, the heat that you have to put up with during that training camp period, but they built a beautiful new indoor facility down in Henderson, and that helped them get ready for this season. And it'll be fascinating watching all these stories going forward.
You know, I look back when you were doing the NFL Today, and, you know, I remember Jimmy the Greek being on, and I used to remember the stories. Like, I wasn't in the business at the time, I was a kid, but I remember the stories I would hear about the NFL always being so nervous about Jimmy the Greek talking about gambling, because it was like gambling was, was a pox on the NFL society, even though the NFL knew that everybody gambled. And it was just an absolutely classic thing. It's like the way people treat prostitution. You know, oh my God, exactly. It's awful. But, you know, but anyway, so
you're right.
I've always looked at it like it's just a matter of time. But the NFL's new embrace of gambling just leads me to believe that, you know, I mean, just imagine if they had done this 10, 15 years ago, and Vegas was now an established franchise. All I can say is the NFL would have made a lot more money over the last 10 years or so than it has, because I think you're right. I think it's an absolute gold mine waiting to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to gambling, and when we brought the Greek in, and I told you before that we had to have that meeting with the then commissioner, Pete Rozelle, the only thing he asked us was not to use the point spread numbers like 3, 7, 10, 10.5, 7.5. And so we figured it out with the checkboard that we could still make it work. And he did not object to if we said they're favored by a touchdown. It was left up to the public to decide if that meant 6 or 7. But going forward, but I would always see Commissioner Rozelle, and by the way, Wellington Mara at the racetrack. Okay, they would go to Churchill Downs, and they were out at the Belmont, and all the big races. I would inevitably run into them. Okay, so I said, aha, they do know what this is all about. Okay, and of course the Rooney family, Art Rooney, what a wonderful person he was. I mean, I love being around him. But of course, he actually bought the Steelers after cashing a nice bet on a horse race That's how he got the down payment for it going forward. I knew that the National Football League knew deep down that everybody was gambling. I knew they knew that. They were just afraid of the publicity and the fallout, or the thinking that they might turn the public off by having it legal in this country. But now, once they threw PASPA out, they had nowhere to go, and they understand it now. In fact, I see these teams. They're actually there are many casinos are now sponsors of some of these teams. On the radio last night, my red zone for the Raiders and for the Saints was the MGM Red Zone. Okay,
Yeah.
So they're in partnership with these casinos going forward, and I think it's good for business. I'll tell you, maybe not in my lifetime, but in yours, my man. There will be betting kiosks inside stadiums at some time in the National Football League, like they have in the soccer stadiums over in the UK and down in Australia, the places that I have visited during those games. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more thing before I let you go. So Monday was the 50th anniversary of the first Monday Night Football game. This was the 799th. But reason I bring that up is that I had a long conversation last week with Joe Namath about the first Monday Night Football game.
Sure.
Jets at Browns, 85,000 people. And Joe said to me, he said, Peter, what is so crazy to think about is that, when we heard that there was going to be a Monday night game regularly, now they had played, teams had played in the preseason, particularly on various nights and all that. But now it was going to be a regular part of the schedule every Monday night. He said, people work, people go to school, and there's the Carol Burnett show. There's Doris Day. There's Laugh-In. There's Mayberry RFD. There's, does the NFL really know what it's doing, putting football on Monday night? And that first year, I looked up the ratings, Brent. The first year on the fall Monday night schedule, Monday Night Football was the 8th of 11 rated shows on the networks in prime time. Mm-hmm. So I think Namath probably was right. And I just want you to look back and tell me, what did you think at the time? Did you think it would work? Was it any big deal to you at the time? I mean, I'm testing you here. You were 31 years old at the time. Right. But do you recall what you thought?
Yeah, I thought it had a chance, because the one thing about Monday night, and yes, Joe is right about school and work, but everybody's home. Everybody, you got a chance to carve out a niche audience for that product. Now, the two gentlemen, in my opinion, who are the most responsible for it, before I get to Roone Arledge and ABC, Art Modell, who owned the Browns, but he'd made his money in the broadcasting business, and Pete Rozelle. They were attempting to build up the marketing of the National Football League. CBS turned them down. We had dominant primetime shows, didn't want anything to do with it. NBC turned them down. The last place network at the time was ABC. Roone Arledge, being very, very creative, convinced the bosses, let's try this. We've got nothing to lose, and maybe we can carve out an audience with it. I talked to Mr. Rozelle, who's no longer with us and was a dear friend at the time. And he laughed and told me so many great anecdotes after that first game, because all the owners weighed in on the telephone with two things. Man, that was great having us in prime time, and get rid of that Howard Cosell. I will never forget the conversations that I had. And Pete, and he got on the phone. He got on the phone because this is what his owners wanted. And he talked to Roone Arledge, and Roone said, no way. Howard stays on the broadcast. And Pete said that was it, as far as I was concerned, because I could go back and tell my ownership, hey, listen, the network won't budge. I tried to get him off, but he said, in reality, I really didn't. He said, I thought he would help us, and certainly he did. I don't know that Joe told you this. Maybe he did. They lost that night. They lost by 10 points.
Yeah.
He was trying to rally the Jets, and a linebacker by the name of Billy Andrews intercepted him on a diving catch, got up, ran for a pick six, and Billy Andrews, the highest moment of his football life, he's still got that football that he intercepted. He gave it to somebody on the sideline to keep for him, and so there it was. But
Can I tell you one thing about?
Sure.
I'm going to tell you one thing about Joe. I talked to him last Friday for 40 minutes. 3 different times, he brought up how, like, he has no joy in the fact that he played in the first game. He only has misery that he threw the ball 2 yards behind Emerson Boozer for an interception that lost the game. And I draw this conclusion from that. What a great teammate Joe Namath must have been, because he wanted to win so bad.
Peter, they loved Joe, the guys who were on that Jets team. And it was Howard had an interview with Joe. You know, he was very close to the Jets. And the ownership of the Jets had told Howard, this is a better football team than the one that won the Super Bowl. And Howard asked Joe, he said, this is what owner told me. What do you think? He said, I'm not so sure, Howard. We'll let you know later. You know, and of course they weren't as good as that team, but it was a wonderful time. And 50 years ago last night, Howard opened that on it was Old Municipal Stadium, Peter. I covered more baseball games in there than I had football games, although I'd seen great Jim Brown and things as a newspaper man. But that dirt infield was still down there, man. It brought me back memories of the White Sox and the Indians playing some of those great series. But Monday Night Football 50 years ago was a baseball infield. And, of course, that's important to the Raiders because they have finally managed to escape.
Yeah, they were the last ones.
Last ones. I'll never forget the last couple of years over there in Oakland. The first guys out of the visitors' locker room would always be the kickers, and they would come out, they would paw at that dirt, and the holder would get down on his knee and see how he could catch the snap and hold it down there. It was fascinating because it worked to the Raiders' advantage several times. A lot of guys didn't like that dirt, and I don't blame them.
Brent Musberger, thanks so much for sharing so many good stories. Good luck. And I really hope this works. It's so much fun. And while I do pine for the people in the East Bay, because that is one of the great event places, and that stadium, as much of a dump as it was, I used to love going to football games at that place because it was alive. It was alive. And I would love walking through the parking lot too. And everybody, it was funny. People were kind of afraid of the parking lot, and I've walked through there, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times, probably 5 times. And I never once felt fear, even with these bizarre people and the weird get-ups. They love their Raiders.
It's interesting you say that. I had the owner of a big-time casino here in Las Vegas a couple of years ago when it was first announced that they were coming, tell me that he was not happy because that rowdy fan base will be coming in. So I go through a couple of years with it over there, parking lot experiences like you, and I go back and I tell him, I said, listen, take this for what it's worth. But that's one of the nicer fan bases that I've ever been around. I said, I'll take you to some college places where it's absolutely dangerous. There were some of those rowdies. But I said, this fan base, they love their team. And I said, one other thing I've noticed about the Raiders, they have more female fans than I've noticed around some other teams. It was always interesting to me when I would show up, check into the hotel, and the fan base, of course, I mean, everybody wears the Raiders logos and colors and that, but it was interesting how many women would come up and want to talk about the team. And that was a strong positive for me with this fan base. And I hope they enjoy traveling to Las Vegas, my man.
Brent, all the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Take care.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.